So, the actual policies which are creating these savings. A lot of it is actually coming from delaying policies which were meant to be funded by the mining tax. And the biggest item here is the drop in the corporate tax rate. It was mooted to fall from 30 to 29%. That's a $4 billion plus policy over a number of years. They're not doing that. That's saving them a great deal of cash. They're increasing taxes on superannuation, particularly for high income earners. If you're on more than 300,000 and you are paying discretionary amounts into superannuation and you're paying 15% on that, well, from July 1 it's 30. Obviously there's a lot of financial planners in the room. You'll know how to find a substitute for that. So maybe it won't quite raise what they think it will, because people are dynamic, particularly the high income earners, but they are targeting that particular loophole, which has been a very, very favoured form of tax minimisation in this country. There's also a deferral of concessional caps for discretionary input to superannuation. The foreign aid bill has been absolutely slashed. Now, you will recall that our former Prime Minister was quite interested in foreign affairs, and he put in place quite an ambitious program of overseas assistance payments. That goal is no longer held by the government. They've slashed that particular item in the budget, and we're no longer going to be leading the world in terms of foreign aid. Defence, big cuts there. You know, $5 billion is a big chunk. I read an article the other day that anyone who wants to invade Australia, 2028 is the year. So start planning early. That is when our Defence Force will become obsolete. But obviously there are very long lead times on these things, and perhaps the defence budget will come back into focus next year. But for this year, it hasn't avoided the razor gangs essentially, and it's going to save $5 billion over 4 years. Parental payments, you've seen everything in the papers about this payment which is being rushed through for school kids before this financial year concludes. That's one of the ways they've shifted payments between periods. That's not what we're talking about here specifically. They are actually changing the eligibility criteria for parental support payments, particularly for sole parents. Once the child of a sole parent turns 8, they will be forced onto a New Start allowance as opposed to a sole parent allowance. And of course you'd be familiar with New Start is you have to actually be actively participating in the labour force to continue to receive that payment, whereas a sole parent payment is a very different thing. So they feel that will reduce the welfare bill, and that's another area where they're focusing. Now, other, that's actually the government's term, not mine. I haven't summed up all of the savings, subtracted these other ones and said that's the residual, that's other. That's the government's category called other, and for the second year in a row, it was actually the biggest single item, because I've actually rolled a few things together in the tax reform delay to get it to a larger level. What having a huge other category indicates to you that the government is running their eye over everything with a very fine-tooth comb, and they're just slashing here and there in every department across the board. So they're trying to squeeze out any sign of fat they can see, and it accumulates to large numbers. But there's no particular policy focus or preference or theme which comes through here. It's just literally hundreds of cuts here and there that sum to a large number. And this year, it gets you above 7 billion over the forward estimates. So it's just an across-the-board efficiency drive which the government has enacted, probably long overdue, given what I've just told you in terms of stimulus spending following a era where spending was very, very strong. We did need it. Is it in sync with the economic cycle at the moment? No, it's not. But if monetary policy does its job and takes the strain, we should come out the other side in one piece. Now, what about the spending? Because like all governments, they don't want it to be solely a sort of, I guess, a feel-bad story. They do want to be reallocating some of these funds they're raising. The mining tax has always been about getting the benefits of the boom and trying to spread them more broadly. So you tax the miners and you reform elsewhere, or you boost a sector which is struggling because the currency is so high, which is driven by the mining industry. But if you go across here, you have a few things which would probably count as reforms, a few things which would count as sort of cash handouts, which would be focused on narrower groups. And you also have a couple of quite important health policies. There is a disability insurance program in here. There's a much bigger focus on aged care. This follows last year's budget, where mental health got a lot of airplay. So there's good stuff in here. They're not gigantic numbers, but there are some reforms in here that should be taken note of. And families, of course, that's where you have your the cash splash on kids at school coming through. That's not cheap. And roads and rail, the Pacific Highway upgrade, the dual carriageway is one of the very big deals there.